Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. If it's not the case, let me know. There's a chat where you can say something. And, that's my regular webinar. Can you hear me, guys? The webinar number 20. Let me check the number. The webinar number 25. And it's the last one about management. So I've been doing webinars about programming and management. I was swapping them, and one about management, one about programming. This one is going to be the last one about management. And if you want to keep listening to me about management, then you will have to switch to my podcast, which is, the title is Shift M. And it's available on iTunes and SoundCloud. So all the talks, all the discussions about management will happen there. So webinars will be focused on programming only. That's the announcement. So this is the final one, and the subject is going to be quite stressful. I will compare micromanagement and microtasking. And microtasking is kind of a term which I'm not sure it's coming from me, but I don't think I've heard that anywhere too often. So I think I can say that this term I'm using as much as I'm talking about management, and I'm not sure everybody else, like so many people, are using it. But I will still compare micromanagement and microtasking as two things which are quite close to each other, but they are about different things, and I will show that micromanagement is a bad thing and microtasking is a good thing. And then I will list a number of my suggestions, a number of hints which I would recommend you to use to apply to your management if you decide to go for microtasking. So the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I will explain why micromanagement is a problem, and then the next 30 minutes, we'll talk about microtasking and how to make it right. So how can you apply microtasking to your project? So let's start with micromanagement. Micromanagement is yeah, I'm just trying to check the chat. Okay, you don't forget that you can post your questions in the chat and I'll answer them later. We are on YouTube. So what is micromanagement? I wrote about that on the blog, but I will still repeat the key problems about micromanagement. What this micro is about. So usually, traditionally, let's say I'm a manager and you are a programmer, and I have some task for you. So I give you that task, and then I want to manage you. So I want to control you. Some people say the control is not the right word, but I want to manage you. So I want to know somehow that the result I'm expecting from you is going to be delivered. And I want to know when, and I want to know how many resources, how much time, and how much money you will spend to get this task done. So I want to manage you, and I actually want to manage the task. I'm not really interested to manage you as a person, but actually to manage this piece of work. So it's a work package according to PMBOK. I want to manage that work package, or a job order, whatever you call it. And what I do is that I give you that task, and then I can either sit and wait for you to come back and bring me the result, or I can start telling you what to do. So if I just trust you on the level, on the surface, if I just trust you on the result level, and which means for me, either you bring back the results or you come back sometimes with the reports about what's the progress, or the other approach is to micromanage you, is actually to go on a micro level and start telling you or start asking you about how you implement the task. So on a good management level, if I don't micromanage you, then I just check what the result is. I can check reports, I can check the progress, but I never ask you how you're doing that, or I'm never telling you how to do that. If I go for micromanagement, I'm like just like taking a microscope, and I'm not interested anymore about the surface. You're not this task, and you are not a black box anymore for me, which I just hold in my hands as a whole piece. Instead, I open that box and I go inside the box with a microscope on the micro level, and I'm telling you what to do. You all understand that micromanagement is a bad idea because first of all, it turns task performers, programmers in our case, this micromanagement turns them into but completely destroys the initiative on their side. So they're not anymore interested in creating something, in innovating, in finding better ways to do things, in improvising, in taking risks. All of the things they just give up, and because they know that sooner or later somebody, the boss, will come in and tell them what to do. So they lose the initiative, and what we have, instead of creative implementers of the job, we get people who are just brainless and really passive implementers of our will, of our intent, of our desires. And for a manager, it may be okay if the task has to be done really fast, and it's a really critical task. Then micromanagement may work. If it's some serious situation, critical situation, for example, somebody's dying, and then you are a chief doctor in the emergency crew, then definitely you need micromanagement. So the chief of the crew is telling exactly what to do to each of the doctor. You check the pulse, you make a shot, and then you get that pill, you hold that hand. So their instructions are instructions are coming directly to implementers, and they do exactly what the manager is telling them to do. And it works, but it works for just really short period of time, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe an hour, when the whole team is actually becoming they don't think, they just do what the manager is saying. If the situation is critical, it works. If you continue to manage these people for a long time, then they will start losing. Eventually you will lose good players, you will lose good doctors, you will stay only with really not so much professional people, and which are happy to be the extensions of your hands instead of being doctors on their own. So for us programmers, the micromanagement means that the team will not produce anything valuable, and the team will basically fall apart sooner or later. So micromanagement is not an option at all. It's not me saying Google for that, and you will read so many articles, and all these articles explaining how you can check whether you are a micromanager already. So if you are, then sit back and try to analyze what you're doing. So most probably you don't trust your people. You don't trust yourself, first of all. So you don't trust yourself as a good manager. So you don't think that you're capable of creating tasks and delivering that tasks in the right way, so that the people you're managing will be happy to do them without your micromanagement. So usually the manager who is doing micromanagement is actually a not professional manager. Instead of doing micromanagement, so micromanagement, I'll give you two titles which usually come to my mind. So micromanagement is a command and control paradigm, meaning that I command you and I control what you're doing. And that's, again, it's really good for a small team in a short period of time when the task is critical. The alternative is called delegate and trust. So that's a right management. So instead of giving you commands and controlling you, I have to delegate the problem to you and trust you that you will be able to deliver the result. And usually that means delegate and trust, and then award and punish. So of course, delegate and trust goes together with the consequences which I put on you, and I make sure that you will be properly rewarded if you manage to complete the task, and you will be properly punished if you fail to do that. It's not so easy. It's not so easy in modern teams, because this award and punishment thing is like a red flag for most managers. They're saying that we don't punish people, we don't reward. I mean, we reward people, we don't punish them. We just they just do their jobs, and they're so happy to do that. But it's not going to work. Delegate and trust always have to go together with reward and punish, and they have to stay together. Otherwise, it's going to be just chaos. It's going to be just delegate, trust, and get nothing. So if you want to get something after your delegate and trust philosophy, then you have to make sure that you have some rules, which we're going to discuss right now. So that's a summary of the first part. Micromanagement is a bad idea. Command and control, it's something from the past. It's something which we got from centuries ago. That's how people were managed for years. And now we need delegate and trust, more of this delegate and trust philosophy. And in order to do that, I believe that microtasking is the way to go. Why and what it is. So microtesting, well, let's imagine, let's take a real situation. Let's say I have a piece of software which needs to be developed, and I'm a manager and I have some programmers. So that piece of software is quite big. It will take like a month of work, and I have, let's say, 3 programmers. So now I have a month of work for 3 people, and I have an option just to break this whole scope into 3 pieces and say, you are doing this piece, you're doing another one, and that person is doing the piece number 3. And then I delegate them. So I just give you the task. You're one of them. I give you the task and I say, you do that. When you complete, you're going to get, I don't know, $5,000. And I trust you will be able to do that. And if you fail, I'm going to give you nothing, for example, or I'm going to give you $1,000. That's a really primitive approach to the delegate and trust and the rewards and punishments. And obviously, it's not going to work because the task is too big. You trust me too much. I will trust you too much. I will delegate you too much. I trust you too much. And I put a huge risk on the whole project because I have just 3 tasks. And the risk of failing in each of them is really big. Well, for many reasons, because it's so big, because I'm not sure how fast you can deliver, because you will have some problems in the process. So you most probably you will fail, and there are going to be 3 failures or 2 failures, and then the entire project will fail most likely. And yes, of course, I will punish you, but most probably this punishment will not really motivate you, will not really push you forward, will only push you back, and you're not going to be interested in completing that. So because the problem is the task is too big. So modern managers, they cannot stop doing micromanagement and start doing real management, good management, because I believe so, because their tasks are too big. They're just managing pieces of work which are too big, and that's why they have to do micromanagement. So if I delegate you that piece of work which is 10 days long, then obviously I cannot just sit for 10 days, checking Facebook page and then just asking you time to time how things are going, and then getting answers like, yeah, I'm working on that. Like, give me another, like a few more days, I'll get back to you. If I'm a good manager, I'll feel very uncomfortable and worried about the final result. So I will come to you next day and ask you, what are you doing exactly? And show me the code you're working on, and explain to me how you will get the progress, and prove and convince me that you will be able to succeed and complete that task in actually 10 days instead of 50 days. That will look like micromanagement. It will become micromanagement, and you will eventually, open all the cards you have, and you will put the responsibility of the result on my shoulders. That's what micromanagement is. The moment you start micromanaging somebody, then the responsibility for the results is shifted back to the shoulders of the manager. The performer of the task is not responsible anymore, because I told you what I'm doing. I gave you all the risks. I explained you all the potential troubles. Now you're responsible for that. I mean, I told you, so what are you blaming me for? You knew about that. You knew about the problems 3 days ago. So the task is not done. What do you want from me? I told you. So that's what micromanagement will lead to, and it's all because the task is big. So I don't see any other solution for the micromanagement problem except microtasking. Microtasking. So when the piece of work is too big, you inevitably will become a micromanager. So the only solution is to make it smaller. So make sure your tasks are small. And that's what we are doing for many years already. And I'll explain how there's nothing to explain, actually. It's obvious. So instead of having 3 tasks for this 1 month of work. Instead, I would rather have 100 tasks, and each of them will take not 10 days, but 1 hour or 2 hours. And then if my tasks are 1 or 2 hours long, then I can give it to you and trust you with this one particular small task. So if the task is 1 hour, I give you the task and I trust you, okay, complete it. I'm not gonna touch you. I'm not gonna ask you how you're doing. Just come back to me in an hour or 2 hours. And then if you fail, no problem. I'm gonna punish you a little bit somehow. I'm gonna give you some, maybe, I don't know, down the negative points or whatever. I'm not gonna pay you. It depends. And then I will give you some other task. So that's how it's gonna work if the tasks are small, because it's not a big problem for me. The risk is really small because I can still give this task to somebody else. I can still change the schedule. I can manage the project on the low level without going on micro level inside the task. So that's the key thing, that the manager should not go into the task. The manager should always stay outside of the border of the task, outside of the scope. So what's in the task, it's your problem. What's outside, it's my problem. And the moment the manager crosses that border, the whole management is ruined. There's no management anymore, because now the performer of the task doesn't feel responsible, doesn't feel like being responsible for the task, because it's like with an object-oriented programming. The moment you cross the border of an object and you break the encapsulation, the object is not responsible for anything anymore. It's not a solid structure anymore. The same with the job. So if the performer of the job opens the box, it's not his or her responsibility. So to be able to do this delegate and trust, we need micro tasks. We need tasks to be really small, like 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours maximum. That's what I think is the right size. And we're doing that. So now I'll give you some recommendations of what I think is right, and it's my experience talking, and you will probably be able to apply it in your projects as well. So I'm doing it using some software, using some methods which we're using, but you can do it as well in your projects, or you can take some of my recommendations and put it on your management, in your management head. So the first one, the principle number one, they're not numbered, just the first one on the list is that the tasks must be small. So they really must be small, and by small, I mean like in our case, where all of our tasks are half an hour, 30 minutes. You may smile about that number, but it's really true. So 30 minutes is the maximum size of the task. In your case, maybe you can go, I tried 2 hours, up to 2 hours years ago, and then I decided to go for 1 hour maximum. Now we have half an hour maximum, and that's a good size. So 30 minutes is how much you can really delegate, and don't worry about what's happening inside. The result will come back. No result, no problem. We'll switch the performer. The result comes back. We take it. We pay for it. We're happy. So I'm asking you to make tasks small. The second recommendation is that you need to have many tasks assigned to one person. So if you have in the project like 10 people, or let's say you have 3 people, like in my example, and then you create 100 of tasks, and then you take one of that tasks and assign to the first person, another task to another person, and another task to another person, and then you wait. That will be wrong, again, in my experience. So if you give them tasks consequentially, one by one, that's going to be bad for their own management. They will feel all the time that there is no agenda for them. So there is no plan for the future. They're just looking at one task, and they're just facing one problem, and they don't know what's going to happen after the task is done. That kind of stresses them too much. It puts too much stress on the performer, because it always creates a sense of instability, which is not what they want. If they want to be, they need to be, these people, programmers, they need to be comfortable in order to deliver more or less stable results on a consistent pace. So that's why I would suggest to assign them about 10 to 15 tasks. That's my number I came to for years, like 3 years of managing people in that mode. I figured out that 15 is the number, which is the amount of tasks you give to one person at the same time. So all of them are small, but their 15 is like an agenda which a person can work with. If you give more, they start ignoring some of the tasks, and you will not be able to actually get anything back, because again, the agenda means that the performer, the programmer, decides which one to work on. But if the task stays in the agenda for too long, then there has to be some punishment. So we're giving 15 tasks and saying you have to complete, they're all half an hour, and we're saying you have to complete each of them not later than 10 days after you get the task. So that's the term we're giving. That's the period of time, 10 days and then 15 tasks in the list. If you put more tasks in the list, then you will get, you will have to, the punishment will happen too often, because the programmers will forget about certain tasks, and this 10 days period will just will just happen. I mean, will be over, and then you will have to punish. And too much punishment is not a good thing in general. So the punishment is important, but if you have too much of that, that lowers the motivation, especially if it happens for the not really because of not an incorrect behavior of the programmer, but it happens because of the situation you created for. In that case, the punishment is not going to help. So 15 is the number. If you give less task, like I tried 5, it's not enough. People are becoming less focused on the project, and they may eventually start asking you, do you have something more? And if you tell them, hey, you have these 5 tasks, they may say, you know what, this first task is not so interested. The second one, I'm waiting for some information, etc., etc. So 15 is the number. The next recommendation is that you have to be formal on each task, and you have to give that tasks in writing. You cannot just tell them what to do. You cannot just explain in an informal face-to-face meeting. You have to use some tool, because if you're not doing microtasking, if it's just big tasks and they're like huge and they will take a week of work, then yes, you can explain, hey, John, this is your job. Do it this way. That's the documentation you have. Go ahead, just work on that. If you're talking about microtasking, you need to write them down. So it all has to be written, and it has to go through some tracking system, some issue tracking, task tracking system, whatever you use. We're using GitHub. We tried to use Track in the past, and we tried Jira as well. No matter what you use, but what's important is that you have to formally describe the task. And you should make sure, that's my second recommendation, they kind of go together, that if you put your requirements, expectations, management directions, risks or impediments, whatever, you put that in writing, then make sure that the discussion of the task also happens there in writing. So some people do like that. They assign a task in Jira, but since people are sitting next to each other in the office, or they're in the same Slack chat, they're able to discuss the task. Let's say like they're typing in and saying, I've got the task 1, 2, 3, and in the task 1, 2, 3, I'm not really understanding the requirements. Can you please explain? And another programmer says, sure, I can explain, no problem. And they start chatting, they start talking in the Slack. That's not really good. It's really actually wrong, because the scope will, you will lose the border of the scope eventually. In some time, it will be difficult to say what actually is the scope in the task, like where we are, because the discussion happened there, and then the ticket says something else. So the ticket says we need to, I don't know, we need to use that piece of software, that piece, like this open source library for compressing the data. And then we had a discussion 2 days ago in Slack, which, another library was introduced. So how about we use that one? And then you know what I'm talking about. So eventually it will be difficult to catch who's right, who's wrong, and you will start losing time, which is really valuable and important when we're talking about microtasking. If that will be a huge task for a week of work, then maybe losing a few hours is not a big problem. But if there is a task for just half an hour, then every minute counts, and you don't want the programmer to lose that minute, and the programmer don't want to do that. So everybody will blame you as a manager for not controlling the flow of information. So you as a manager has to be responsible for controlling where the information flows from our heads, from our discussions, to the description of the task. And it always has to be a clear path, that if we discuss something, it should go in writing, and preferably we need to discuss in writing. So we are, in our case, we are actually prohibiting, you probably know about that, but we are actually prohibiting people from having any informal communications aside from the task tracker. So our programmers in our project, they just technically cannot talk to each other in Slack or in Skype. They just cannot call each other and ask, hey, how about I don't compress the data with this library? I tried that one. What do you think about that? That kind of questions are prohibited. They just don't have technical ability to do that. All they can do is can jump in GitHub and ask that question inside the ticket, and then somebody will answer. So we keep communications always in one place. Can you do that? Try it. Especially technical, well, especially management discussions, like discussions about what's going to be the deadline for this task. Can I change the scope? Can I change the budget? Can I change the performer? That things definitely have to be in writing. But technical discussions as well. And we had an interesting conversation in the ShiftM podcast a few days ago, and there was an example of somebody who said that we actually in our team we discuss technical things in GitHub only. So we don't have, we don't have meetings, we don't have these phone calls, we don't have Skype. We discuss things in our tickets. That was amazing. So it happens. So people do that. You can do that as well. The next one. Let me check my list. Yeah, the next one is that preferably, that would be ideal if you can attach motivation of programmers to the results of the tasks they close. I was saying that many times. I'll repeat it again. So the best way to pay to us programmers is not by the hour, but by the result we deliver. And if you can break down the scope into smaller pieces and call them tasks and call them micro tasks, then you can attach some dollar amounts to each task. And then when I close the task, I get the money. That would be ideal. That makes the management way easier, because you get a clear motivation of each programmer to actually finish the task. Can you do that? That would be perfect. You can get to it. For example, you can give some points to the task. Maybe you will still continue to pay programmers per hour or per month, which is traditional way of paying, and it's quite old, but still you can assign some points for completing the task. Like if you complete, the more tasks you complete, for example, by the end of the month, the more bonuses you will get, like financial bonuses. So you can have some what do you call, hybrid model where you pay per hour, and at the same, and also you pay per result. In my case, it works perfectly. I'm suggesting you to do the same. If you go for microtasking, pay for these tasks. The next recommendation is that we need to give programmers an ability to reject a task. I think it's important. If you break down the scope into micro pieces, then these micro pieces will go to programmers, and you as a manager will make mistakes in creating these micro pieces. That's going to be, that will happen. It's inevitable. Sometimes you will create tasks which are not doable, which don't make any sense, which are just by mistake, which are too big or too small, whatever. So some of them will be just management-wise incorrect. They will say something which the programmer cannot implement. And if you force programmers to just implement whatever they take, that's going to be an issue. That's going to be a problem. People will start complaining, and nothing good will come out of that. The right way is to give them, programmers, an ability to say, I don't like task 57. I like all my tasks. I like all my tasks, but I don't like 57. I'm not going to do it. And that I'm not going to do it. That rejection has to go directly to the shoulders of the manager. It's perfect. It is a problem of a manager purely, nothing else, nobody else. So the manager will has to accept it and do something about it. We are doing that. We're allowing programmers to just reject the task with almost no consequences. We have some consequences actually. So we have this rating system. So we give points for tasks, not only money but also points. So when you reject a task, you're going to get some negative points, not too much, but something. So you're getting some negative points, which don't affect your money at all. So you will still going to be paid for other tasks. But if you reject too much, then your rating will go down, which is not good for your future. So maybe you can do the same. So if the one programmer rejects too much, it's not going to be good for the future appraisal at the end of the year or something. in my statistics, people reject tasks, but it happens if the programmer is like normal programmer who knows what to do. Then one out of 15, or maybe out of 10, so it's about 5 to 10% of tasks will be rejected for some reasons. And that's a perfect number. I mean, I think it's a perfect number because these tasks, they come back to the manager, and manager do something with them, and then they go back again to programmers. Some of them we delete because they duplicate, for example. Some of them we improve, but this mechanism of throwing the task back to management from the programmer has to be clearly explained. It has to be somewhere in your policy of your team. So it has to be clear. If the new programmer comes in, you explicitly explain to them that you can reject a task. You're not forced to do whatever you get. You should do only the tasks which look good for you, which are clear, which make sense, which you love to work with. If you reject too much, it's going to be probably a question for the management. Maybe we hired the wrong person. Maybe we gave you the wrong project. Maybe we didn't motivate you enough. Maybe there are so many reasons, but it has to be a clear mechanism of rejection. That's my recommendation. Another one is that I believe that in the microtasking model, tasks must be assigned to programmers by the manager only. So some people say that how about you put all the tasks available in the agenda, in the long list, the backlog, whatever you call it, and then let programmers pick them out. So let everybody just go to the backlog, select the task, and just do it. I believe it's wrong. Honestly, I've never tried it, but I just believe it's wrong. And in our case, we always assign tasks to people. So we're not asking them to come to the log and check what's interesting, but we're picking the tasks we need to be done, and then we assign them to programmers. Some of them reject something. It happens, like I said, like 5–10% of tasks, but in most cases it doesn't happen, and we are actually controlling the situation. So our managers are able to control what's going on because of that approach. So I'm suggesting you do the same. So don't let people pull tasks out of backlog. Instead, take tasks and it's assigned to them. Why? I think that the main reason, like I said here, is that if you let them pull, then most probably they will pull the easiest tasks, and the ones, yeah, that's what I can say, the easiest. And that means that the backlog will by the end of the project, you will stay with the most complex tasks in the backlog, which is not what you want. You want quite the opposite. So you want the most complex tasks to be done first, and nobody will want to take them because they are the most complex. So that's why, you know, the whole situation will be upside down. Instead, you need to push them. Instead of using pull approach, you need to push tasks to programmers. Some of them will reject, but it's not a big deal. So here's my recommendation: only the manager assigns tasks. The next one, it's a really like famous rule called 0/100. It's a rule which means that the task must always be treated as done or not done. So there has to be nothing in between. It's not actually only for tasks, for microtasking. It's in general in management. It's a good rule, I think, where the manager treats results as 0 or 100. I mean, 0 is nothing is done, and 100 is 100% is done. If you allow your programmers to deliver you something which is half done, you are demotivating the team. You're going to lose control. It's no good. You'll not do anything good for yourself. You should always treat them as you're still working on the task, meaning that the task is not done. I don't care where you are. I don't care how far you are on the progress. Maybe you're so close, but we don't care. You're 100% done when the task is closed. That's a good rule, and not so many teams actually are working by this rule. I've seen many teams where managers are actually, accepting excuses, so-called. They're accepting excuses for why the task is not done, why I want to make some compromises, why I need to cut corners somewhere. It's no good. So it's 0 or 100. That's a good rule applied. You will see. In our case, for micro-tasking, it's quite easy, because for big task, if you're managing a task which is of a size of 10 days, it's going to be difficult, because it will be so difficult for somebody to completely finish the scope of such a big task. So it's always going to be 0 or 80% or 85% done, or that famous 90% done, which is the task is always 90% done, no matter when you ask. So for microtasking is way easier, because the task is small, it's 1 hour. So if you're not done, then don't come back to me, just keep doing it or reject it. I mean, you either bring back the result or reject it. So I would suggest to apply that rule. Another recommendation is that with microtasking, I think it's my experience that it's very important to focus on quality controls. Because people will work on small tasks, they will feel way less responsible for a full result of the project. So when you give somebody a big task, like a whole week of work, then that person during this week touches many places in the code, feels responsible for all the changes which he or she is doing, feels kind of emotionally attached to the full result of the project. And well, the level of responsibility, emotional level of responsibility, is quite high. So people will make less mistakes. When we're talking about microtasking, that there is almost no emotional attachment to the full project. It's always one small piece of something. So you give me the small class to design. I design you the class. I don't care about other classes. Just let me close the task. Pay me for it. Or you gave me the unit test which didn't work. Let me fix the unit test. I don't care about other unit tests. I just fix this one. I don't refactor anything around. I just fix one small problem. Of course, I don't feel responsible for the whole code base. And that means that's a problem for you as a manager. If all your programmers think like that, then of course the quality of your code base is at jeopardy or at risk. So they may break, well, they will lower the quality eventually, inevitably it will happen. And you need to introduce some methods to prevent that from happening. We're using static analysis. We're using a number of code reviews. We're using pre-flight builds, for example. So there are technical instruments which will help you to prevent some bad things from happening. And my point here is that you need to pay attention to that. If you're doing traditional management plus micromanagement, then it's not such a big deal. And that's why in most software teams, they're not making, for example, static analysis as a mandatory something. They're just, it's like optional thing, fun things to work, a good thing to have, but it's not mandatory. In our case, all of these quality controls are really mandatory, and it's super important. So if I remove my quality controls from any of my projects, and I let programmers continue working in microtasking mode, then the code base will be ruined in a few weeks. I'm telling you, I've seen that. I mean, we started like years ago without so strict control, and it was a nightmare. So you give these microtasks to many people, and then after 20 pull requests, your code base is a mess, and then you have to jump in and do something with that. And then you blame yourself because you feel like you paid for all of this task. You told all of them that, yeah, that's great, thank you, you contributed. But then you look at the code base and you understand that it's not anymore a code base. It's not your code base anymore. It's some mess. Because all of these programmers, they didn't feel like it was their code base. It was just some code base where they were able to make some money. So that's really important. Strict quality control. How you do that, it's up to you. But you have to do it. And maybe the final suggestion, and then we'll have the questions, is I would recommend, there's going to be an obvious problem. When you give a micro task to somebody, the task is 1 hour, then that person, the programmer, will face certain troubles and problems and bottlenecks because of incomplete documentation, because I have to wait for somebody else, because that build is not clean now, so I have to wait for somebody to fix that, or because the server is not ready. So it's going to be many, many impediments which will make it impossible or very difficult to move forward. So you give me the task, you promise to pay like 1 hour for it, like, I don't know, $50, and you gave me the code base, and then you gave me 10 days to complete that. I mean, I can't do it in 10 days or less. And then I'm trying, but I see that there are so many problems around me that I cannot move forward. So what do? Well, the right way, as in any project, is to report that bugs. So go to the tracking system and say, hey guys, your code base is not as clean as I wanted it to be. So how about somebody fix it for me? And then I file another bug, then I file another bug. I will do that, but in the end, you will still pay me $50. That's not fair, because I actually contributed to your project with these bug reports. So I spent some time on finding that troubles, and I spent some time to reporting that bugs. So if you just pay me 50, by the end of this full, long story, I'll be disappointed, and I'm not gonna be so motivated to continue to work with you. So the right way, that's what we are doing, and I think it's a good motivational trick, is to pay me, as I'm a programmer, to pay me for the bugs I'm reporting. So you promised me to pay when you promised me something when I close the task. Also give me something when I'm telling you what's wrong with your project, because I'm helping you. I'm not moving forward with my task, but I'm helping you with other tasks. I'm helping you to improve your code base. So I'm helping you to make it better. So that's what we're doing. That's my suggestion. So in general, make sure that people are motivated somehow. They're interested to tell you what's wrong with your project. Otherwise, they're going to do that, or they will just walk away, because they will say, hey, they just pay me for just one small micro task, but they don't pay me for the time I spent to investigate why I cannot complete that task. So we're paying for bugs, and we're doing it for, I guess, 4 years. And it's quite successful. Sometimes it may not work when people try to abuse the system sometimes. So they may find some issues which are quite easy, or really cosmetic, or really not so important, or just duplicates. And they will report, because they know that they're going to pay for that report. And you need some quality control of that reporting. So you need to look at the reports they're providing you and reject them if they're not so good. That's what I feel. So that's all. That's what I wanted to say about micro testing. These recommendations. There could be some more, but that's probably the most important things which I learned over the last 5 years of doing this, or 6 years of doing this micro testing. And when I started, I didn't know all that. So I just learned them on the go. I learned them when I was actually doing this kind of management, and I realized that these things are important. So maybe they will be useful for you. So let me take a look at the questions we have. We have some questions in the chat. There are 40 people listening to me now. So let me check. Yeah, one comment is delegate, trust, and get nothing. Good point. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. That's why people don't like this delegate and trust. That's why they go for micromanagement, because they know that you delegate, you trust, and then you get nothing. So the micromanagement is a solution. The next question, how do you know in advance all the 1-2 hours tasks for a whole project? Do you spend a week creating task list? That's a good question. I don't know how you will do that. We are actually using puzzle-driven development approach. There was a webinar 2 webinars ago, and I explained how it works for us. So when we start the project, we don't have a full list of tasks. We create that task on the go. Like when we go, the list of tasks is growing together with us. How it happens? Watch the webinar, it explains. It's called puzzle-driven development. How you will do that, it's up to you. Maybe you can create the full list in the beginning. I doubt it's possible. But at least for a sprint, or whatever you use, like for a week or 2 weeks, you can sit together and decide what these tasks will be. Maybe if you sit together and decide, it's not going to be possible to define all the 1-hour tasks or 2-hour tasks. But in that case, if you wanted to go like on really low level, like we're doing half an hour, then you need something like puzzle-driven development. And we have a tool for you, so try it out. It's called, the website is zeropdd.com, which will definitely be a solution. Some projects are using it already. I'm using it for all of my projects, and it helps me for years. I just made it open source a few months ago. It was a proprietary software for years. Now it's open source, so just use it. Another comment is, I think I like the idea of microtasks in one sense, but another part of me wants to be the manager, the one who dishes out the tasks. Who manages the manager? Who manages the manager? In my case, it's me. Who will manage you, and you will be the manager. Actually, this task of breaking down the scope into microtasks is not a task you would want to do, because it's kind of routine and really boring, and we need to pay attention to details. That's why we are trying to use computers for that. So we use, for example, the Zero PDD hosted solution. It's a bot which creates tasks for you right in the GitHub. So you don't need to create that task. All you need is to assign them. And that's what Zerocracy will help you with, the platform I'm developing right now. Another one, can you suggest any software which supports that kind of planning when you give them 15 half-hour tasks and none of them should hang more than 10 days? That's a good question. This software is proprietary. I mean, we are using it for our projects, and now we are planning to make it public and let it be on the market. It's not going to be open source, but it will be for rent. So you will be able to sign up and get that full package for your project, and it will do exactly what I said. It will assign 15 tasks. It will check that each task is not taking longer than 10 days. All of that things will be automatically managed for your projects. Jira, there are some suggestions in the chat. Jira, well, Jira is not going to do that. Maybe if you can design some plugin for Jira, then yes. But yeah, it's not going to help probably with deadlines for each particular task. Another question, what if some task involves several people? Say, as a developer, I see that once I finish this particular task, I get $50. It means code, push, pass, a review, and merge. How to manage reviewers? Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I didn't mention that, but I thought it's obvious that you absolutely have to make sure that each task has just one performer. So there's no group responsibility, always individual. So if you're talking about microtasking, because each task has to go directly to one person, not to a group of people. The reviews, how we do that is that we give you the task, and then when you bring back the result, then we pass, it goes through the reviewer, actually 2 reviewers, and each reviewer has its own task to review your task. So actually, to complete your task, we have 3 tasks: your result, and then review, and another review. So we pay 3 times. We pay you, we pay the reviewer, and we pay the architect who reviews the reviewer. That's how it works for us. So it's 3 independent pieces of money, pieces of work, 3 independent elements in the work breakdown structure. And that's how it should be, I believe. So these 3 people, they're doing separate pieces of work. The one person, you, is creating the code. Another person is checking what you created, gives you comments, and make sure the code goes in or doesn't go into the master branch. So there are 3 payments for each task. Another question, pooling tasks from pool works better if developers are paid hourly. No need to pick easiest. However, major downside of it is that developers tend to pull tasks from the same area, becoming experts. That's also a good point, exactly. So if you let them pull, then, well, I'm not sure that if you pay them per month, they will still pull the most complex task. Maybe the most, senior and the most self-motivated people will actually pick the hardest tasks because they want some challenge in their life. But in most cases, I think people will pick the easiest task. But I mean, it depends on the people. But about the experts, that's definitely true. So if you let them pull, they will naturally pull what they like to do and what they know best. So if they know something about RESTful API in your application, they will continue pulling tasks which are related to the RESTful API. And that person will inevitably become an expert in the RESTful API. Which is not good. We all know about that. So it's not good to have an expert in one area, because tomorrow you may for some reason lose that person, and you will lose the knowledge. So it's better to rotate people inside the project. So it's always a new task comes to you from a different part of the project, and you never know which part is coming next. That will improve the quality of code dramatically. Another question, I wonder how to overcome problem of slow switching context when your tasks are half an hour. That's also a good question. That's indeed may happen. So some people complain about that, programmers I work with. So they're saying that if there are 15 tasks, then I always have to switch, tasks, and it takes some time. I need to create a Git branch. I need to switch to that branch. I need to understand what this task is about from scratch. That's true. But it also kind of helps us to improve the quality of code, because everybody will complain about that. And every single programmer, if it takes longer for that person to switch tasks than it should, but it should take really fast. Like I switch my branches and I open the task and I immediately understand what I need to be done, because the code is clean, the task description is clean, the documentation is very transparent. Then I can jump into the task and do it immediately. If I can't do that, I will report a bug. I will say something is wrong with the project, fix it for me. And somebody will fix it for me. So the project will improve and improve and improve. Because it was always difficult on each small step, it was difficult for me to go forward. And I complained about that. I didn't just swallow it and say, whatever, they pay me anyway by the end of the month, so I'll switch the tasks, let it take an hour to switch from one task to another. Who cares? But in this case, people do care, because they know that it's their time. They don't want to switch for that long. They will complain, and the project will improve. Another question, how to go to microtasking if your project is legacy abomination, which takes half an hour to even start? I don't know what is legacy abomination, to be honest. My English is not that perfect, I guess, but I feel the pain in the word legacy. So obviously, legacy is something which comes from the past, and it's something messy which we have to deal with. And then we open the code, we'll look at that legacy, and we say, "What are you talking about? What do you mean 1 hour? It will take me a week just to understand what it is." If it happens, again, the same recipe. You just complain about that. You just say, "Hey, your project is not ready for completing the task in 1 hour. So do something about it." And then something will jump in and fix somehow the project and improve it somehow. Add some documentation, do some refactoring, and whatever. And then you will. It happened to me, like when we start a task and it says like 1 hour, and then there are so many complaints before we can actually continue with that task. Then it takes a few months before the entire project is prepared to actually fix that small bug. I remember that was a joke I've seen, like, a year ago in the house. A wife asks a husband to fix a lamp or something like that, like change the lamp in the toilet, in the bathroom. And then the husband goes there and tries to fix the lamp, but he finds out that he tries to use the ladder to climb there, but the ladder is broken. So he goes trying to fix the ladder, and to fix the ladder, he opens the box and trying to find the screwdriver, but the screwdriver is broken. And then he goes to the shop. He wants to buy the screwdriver. He starts the car, but the car doesn't start. And then he's fixing the car. And then the wife comes in and says, "What are you doing?" And he's fixing the car. And I asked you to change the lamp. And he said, "What do you think I'm doing? I'm fixing the lamp." So he was fixing the car in order to fix the lamp. So it's just such a long line before the lamp can be changed. Actually, he had to do so many steps, so many preliminary steps before the lamp can be fixed. The same happens in our project. So the lamp is the legacy. So you start, no, actually the car is the legacy, or the whole thing is the legacy. So you cannot change the lamp, because so many things around you are actually broken. So what do? You complain, and then if you fix and fix and fix. A few more questions. We're finishing. Related to 15 tasks for a developer topic. Does each developer get 15 completely random tasks, or 15 tasks within the same domain? No, like I said, it's always random 15 tasks. We're trying to rotate and randomize the process of assigning tasks to avoid the creating of experts. Experts are evil in general. If you have experts in your project, I think I've had a few talks about that, explaining that experts are a trouble. If you have them, It's not good. So that's why you just rotate tasks. You also can rotate people. You can move people from one project to another. You can even remove people entirely from your project and then bring new people. Sometimes we do that as well. If you have the same team working with the same project for like a year, then probably it's time to refresh the team and bring new blood, which will complain about things which the previous team was not paying attention to. What is the right behavior for a developer who faces the manager which describes technical implementation? Cross the line. Yeah, so what do you do if somebody is trying to micromanage you? Well, I believe it's a problem of, like I said, people are not doing it because they're evil, because they're like, bad managers, or they're just bad intentions. They really love to micromanage. No, they're just doing it inevitably. It just happens because they cannot do any other way, because they do traditional management of big tasks. So their tasks are too big, and it's not possible to manage a big task without the micromanagement. Or you will just fail on big time. So the whole project will fail. So they just have to micromanage you because they don't know what you're doing, and they don't trust you, and they cannot trust you because the piece you're holding in your hands is too big for them for actually giving you that amount of trust. That's why they micromanage. The last question we're finishing. Do you do any dependency management for microtasks? If one task depends on others to be done, how do you manage that? That's a good question. As well, we have software for that. So we, of course, will look at the full list of tasks. We have like hundreds of them. Sometimes we have thousands of them. In some projects, we've had about 1,800 tasks. I mean, not at the same time. They're not like a backlog, but they are in the backlog, and most of them are closed. But that's the amount of tasks we pass through our team for about 2 years, less than 1.5 years. So it's a few hundred tasks a month. Well, a few, maybe 100 tasks, maybe 100, from 1 to 200 tasks a month comes through one project. And of course, they have dependencies. Of course, we see that one task depends on another one. And yeah, we have our software for that. And again, let me a little bit promote. So it's going to be the platform called Xerocracy. You can see it on my About Me page on the blog. It's a link to the site. It's not ready yet, but it will do that publicly for public projects, and you will be able to rent that. And it will be free for open source projects. So if you have open source something, you will be able to just rent that software for free and let our managers, our computers, manage your projects in the way I just explained, with this microtasking and planning of everything in an automated way. So that's all I wanted to say. We still have 30 people staying with us. It's a good result. Again, the reminder, this is the final management webinar. No more management talking on video. It's going to be just a Shift M podcast, just audio. So come back next month. We're going to continue talking about object-oriented programming every month, the first Wednesday of the month, 11 a.m. morning, Pacific time, California time. Thank you very much. I just stopped recording right now. Bye-bye.